Hi, welcome back to the Ultra Malavasi channel. I'm Coach K. I'll be your host today. Coronavirus has changed the way we have been approaching our lives. Our goals have changed, activities have changed, our behavior is changing in the process. The way we play and enjoy outdoors have completely changed. Our perspective towards people have changed. With the initial shock that we all had, I think now after more than 100 we have come to terms with it and trying to embracing the new norm. Everyone is adjusting to the new standards, social distancing, Zoom calls, Google Meets, Skypes, and homebound workout sessions, reconstruct the foundation workshop, especially those who are associated with my academy can appreciate that. And weekly discussions with experts, we suddenly have started seeking for more knowledge and information around us. Not meeting many people very often. We are all dealing with a dramatic change. The risks are not over yet. The vaccine is still not anywhere closer to sight. The lockdown has happened. Now the government is relaxing us to move around with lockdown. That's for the business continuity and flow of life. We can't still socialize. We can't leave house. There is a fear all around us. I've been thinking about bridging the gap in terms of the knowledge and understanding towards this deadly disease, which has kind of clamped down literally every part of the world. We are overloaded with a lot of information, different sources, news media, print media, WhatsApp, the chat windows, and it is overwhelming. And I thought of bringing an authentic conversation with experts in this field. For me, it was an easy pick. I would say I was also very fortunate about this. I have two doctors, experts in their own domain, in their own fields. They're part of the Case Fit Academy. They are proud to be the Fitsians. They have been dealing and battling with the virus on the front end. They've been doing this literally every single day. It doesn't matter which time of the day, which hour of the day, or which day of the week. It doesn't matter. My great respects to those two of them. I have Dr. Magesh. He is an MBBS doctor with MS in ophthalmology. He's been serving the medical community for multiple years. Currently, he is the Deputy Medical Superintendent of the ESI Hospital and Medical College, KK Nagar, since 1991 in Chennai. I also have Dr. Rifa Khan. She's a clinical epidemiologist. I hope I got that right. She has completed Masters in Public Health for Development, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicines in UK. She is the physician point of contact for 16 YRG Care, John Hopkins University, Integrated Care Centers, or they're also called as ICC, for high-risk behavior populations across India.
I'm Dr. Mahesh from ESI Medical College and Hospital in Chennai. I've been the Deputy Medical Superintendent there. And all these days of lockdown right from the beginning of March, we have been having, the normal rush of patients. Usually we have around 2,000 patients per day and we are around 450 bedded hospital. Now we have, when the lockdown began, the crowd was altogether less. Say it was around 50 to 70 per day. And then, there were no corona cases. And slowly, the GH opened and we had to ready the hospital. So that's why we had to commute from the house to the hospital, getting my hospital set it up for COVID readiness. So we have an old building and new building. We converted the entire old building into a COVID hospital. So actually in COVID, if you see, so there are three things: COVID care centers, COVID care health facility, and large COVID care hospital. So mine is a COVID care hospital with a ICU and for isolation facilities. So it's having oxygen and ventilators and backup, and then we have all the personnel put together, giving them the duty roster. So it was that sort of the way, sir. And as far as my fitness is concerned, it's just trying to sneak out.
So much of complexity in setting up all the infrastructure. and also putting all the processes in place as a medical care provider. So what's your connection with running and fitness? I'm sure you had a glorious past of being a bodybuilder. So can you talk about
Oh,
that?
yeah. So almost for the past 40 years, I've been into this weight training and bodybuilding. And I was, some 3 times the runner-up in the Mr. Madras Medical College during my undergraduate days. And thereafter, for the past 29 to 30 years, I've been taken up running as a passion, and I was a stress buster. And from 2013 or 14 onwards, I took up to this half marathons, full marathons, and ultras, slowly getting inducted into it. Though not, maybe the best benchmarkers, I mean, among the best benchmarkers, okay, I'm able to do it. And then finally, you see, I came into this OT Ultra, there I saw you, then you conducted this Bison Ultra, I took part in it.
Excellent. Dr. Rifa, what's your story? What is keeping you busy these days as a doctor?
Right. I think I work in the part that comes preliminary to, sending patients to where Dr. Mahesh is. So we're more on the community part of it. And so where I work is I work as a clinical epidemiologist for an organization called the Y.R. Gaitonde Foundation for AIDS Research and Education. And initially, this organization was set up as an HIV specialist care center. But now we've sort of grown 16-fold, and we're actually present all across the country. And we work with the National AIDS Control Organization and with the state governments, wherein we basically set up healthcare centers nested within government hospitals. And so similarly, our job here is to sort of strengthen the existing healthcare infrastructure in the city. I'm also working in Chennai now. So my job is basically screening people when they walk in and seeing if they need a COVID test. The second part of it is communicating the data that you get from different sources and sort of relaying it to the city health officials, because the Chennai has something called the Stop Corona portal, wherein you have to key in information so they know in real time how many tests are being done, who is positive, and what isolation measures need to be implemented. And the ICMR is another portal, wherein you have to key in information which goes directly to the Prime Minister's office. And, this is the information they use to basically make policy decisions on lockdowns and, making containment zones and things like that. The third part of it is making testing accessible. And by that, what I mean is, the costs involved in this. How do we bring those costs down? Are there better tests coming up? And that's something we'll discuss in the course of this discussion. And so that's what's been keeping me busy since 23rd March. As far as my relationship with fitness goes, I was probably don't have a glorious past like Dr. Mahesh. I was always more of a bookworm, and I couldn't understand why people would put themselves through dangerous activities like, hardcore sports. But I would prefer to, do my 20 laps in the pool, or, do my quiet run somewhere, but never, hardcore into sports. But in the last a year and a half, I was basically involved in setting up something called integrated care centers in about 16 states in India, and which basically meant that 2 weeks in a month I would be traveling. And what I realized was that I wasn't looking after myself in this process. And something that really changed the way I look at fitness is, I remember being on a flight during, I don't know if you recall this, there was a tornado sort of in northern India, which affected a large, all the larger northern Indian states. And it was at that time that our flight was caught in that bad weather. And it just made me realize that this could be the end, and I need to do, sort of go out there more into the nature and not be focused only on diseases and death, and probably do something more health related. And that's when I started running seriously, and I've just completed about 5 or 6 half marathons. I finished my first full marathon last year. And I've run 2 ultras, and my last run was the Bison Ultra, and absolutely a memorable experience. So that's just my experience with fitness.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I certainly have a lot of great respect for the entire medical community, and knowing you both part of my circle, it's amazing what you guys are doing. On behalf of the entire academy, thank you so much for the services. So this is simply amazing. Both are in a very responsible job, and at the same time, also fighting in your own ways to keep the virus away from all of us, and also taking care of the patients or even the suspects. Definitely, it's heartening to see the amount of work that goes inside and back end. We don't see most of the doctors working, but we are very blessed to have both of you here on this conversation. So now, I know this information about COVID has been transmitted. We've been hearing a lot about the virus, how it was originated, where it is going, how it is spreading. Just for to bring in a structure to this conversation, I would appreciate if Dr. Rifa, can you just talk us about what this virus is all about, how it transmits, and what are its barriers in a form of conversation to talk about this particular virus, which is the center stage of all our discussions today.
So, Coach, as I'm sure a lot of you here in this group already, well informed about how this virus originated, and we know that it started from the wet markets in Wuhan, and it came to news on 31st of December 2019, and on the 1st of Jan 2020, the Wuhan market was shut, and after that, Wuhan has been under lockdown. But by then, I think it was already quite late. And the infection had it's an airborne infection, and it is caused by one of the viruses from the coronavirus family. But what we need to know is that not all coronaviruses cause a pandemic. Okay, there are certain coronaviruses which also cause flu-like illness, but not to this extent. They are not as infectious. Their mortality rate is not as high. And then, of course, we had the first case in India somewhere, towards the end of Jan, where we found out that, there was a student who was studying in China and those who came back. And some of the first cases that came into the country were in Kerala. But Kerala did a fantastic job of actually controlling, the epidemic in the state. And it just you realize that the determinants of health are not just medical. You need such a strong social support in terms of how do you care for these people who are sick? How do you care for the people, or the families of those who are affected? So I think Kerala did a fantastic job. And then after that, gradually international travel was stopped in the country. And what we see now is by then some of the infection has already come in, and for a long time ICMR said that there was no community transmission, because sometime in March there was a study that was done wherein they saw about 870 odd people, and they tested them and they found that the positivity was not as high, and that's why they said that there was no community transmission. What we need to understand at that point was that the testing capacity was not as much, and compared to what it is right now. As far as the virus itself goes, there is a lot of speculation, I understand, about whether this is a lab-made virus. And there has been some speculation regarding some studies that were going on in China regarding a gain of function research, which probably led to this. So the honest answer is that we don't know. There is still investigations that are being held. There is an independent committee that is being set up by the WHO to investigate this. But what we also know is that coronaviruses are the kind that mutate very slowly, and they do have the potential to jump species. So what has happened here is it's jumped from bats to humans. But what is missing here is the intermediate host. Okay, so the past viruses that you have seen, like the SARS-1, and you've seen MERS. So earlier you had an intermediate host, which is previously known to us, as in case of MERS, it was the dromedary camel, and in case of other influenza viruses also, you know that there's avian flu, there's also the swine flu, so you know that there's an intermediate host. But in case of the coronavirus, we still don't know that yet. But what is fantastic about the kind of progress that has happened with science is the entire genome of the virus was sequenced in like less than a month, and it was shared widely with the rest of the scientific community to sort of start working on vaccines. And so we are at that stage now that this virus has been known to us for about 6 months, and we are already in phase 1 of the vaccine trials for and there are about 159 candidates for vaccine trials, and so there has been enormous progress in those terms. There are a lot of unknowns, but I would stop at this.
It's good summary to know the origin and also the history of the virus and what has been the efforts taken all over the. Well, just a follow-up question on that. When you said that the vaccines are being developed, is that right now all those pharmaceutical companies going on a parallel race, or are they collaborating? Do you see a lot of collaboration happening between countries? Everybody is kind of, there is a race, independent race to find out who goes first. Are they all working in tandem or in isolation, or do you collaboration between countries?
So that's a very good question, and there is an organization called CEPI, which is basically the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, and this is an organization that was formed very recently, but it has done phenomenal work in sort of galvanizing global effort in terms of having people to work together, because a healthy dose of competition is good. But if it's just going to be duplication of effort, then it's just wasted resources, right? So what we're seeing now is you have the best of brains from research institutes collaborating with funding organizations like the NIH and, for example, the Oxford University coming together, and the pharmaceuticals working with them. So it's a lot of collaboration happening at the moment. Yeah.
What exactly is the global picture of this vaccine? Not the vaccine. I'm sorry. Let me repeat that question. So what exactly is the situation of coronavirus across the world? Is it like growing bigger and bigger, a lot of people dying? Do you see that there is the flattening of curve was spoken a lot in the initial days of the coronavirus, but I'm not sure if that is the point of discussion. So Dr. Mahesh, do you have some views about what's happening? What is the worldwide picture of the virus and the chaos around it?
So as far as India is concerned, it's also again based on the state. You see the capitals, especially the metropolitan states like our Chennai, Mumbai, Delhi, Calcutta, where the density of the population is so high. This peculiar virus, or this particular virus has got high infectivity. It gets infected so fast, and so that is why they say the norms is be away. By being away, it means that the virus doesn't spread from one person to other. As you must have all known that it's the say 6 feet distance, they say. So what I'm going to say is, the more the dense the population is, the infectivity is high. And that's why you see in Mumbai it's very high, and Chennai, especially Chennai, it's also very high. And in Mufasal places, again, the virus has been carried from the elite population to the rural areas. But in rural areas, the population is distributed far off, so the infectivity is a bit less. Now, this is only as far as India is concerned. As far as other regions are concerned, I think Ria Madam will be able to answer it better.
I don't know about better, but I'm going to try. So something that's very important in infectious diseases dynamics is something called R naught, okay, which is basically the power to often a virus to infect people in a totally susceptible population, which is what we were 6 months back, right? So the R naught is a little bit of mathematics. This is so you would have heard about a lot of mathematical models that are being used to predict whether you need a lockdown, you don't need a lockdown. Where do you sort of place your intervention? But the idea of an R naught is something that doesn't work on its own. It is dependent on factors such as your contact, right? How many people you come in contact with, which is what Dr. Mahesh has said, more denser the population, so high chances of transmitting the infection. The duration of infectivity, that is, how long are you infectious? And in case of coronavirus, the period of incubation period is 2 weeks, 2 days to 2 weeks. Right. So this is the time that you may be asymptomatic, but you may still, transmit the virus to someone else, and which is why the quarantine period is 2 weeks. Right. So these are two very important factors, and something even more important that has come out in the current research and in modeling data is that a factor called dispersion, which is what is important, because as you notice, the denser the population, the population density, the more cases you're seeing now. So but that's at a city level, right? But in terms of smaller individuals, you basically have to watch out for clusters, and by clusters you basically mean let's say groups of like bars and clubs, or even for that matter, I would go so far as saying religious gatherings. And that is why it has been said that they have delayed opening religious places for this long. As far as the what's happening out in the world, the idea is that you're looking at health systems at war with the virus. So every country has a unique health system, and they have their own challenges. So what we're seeing now is the first wave of this has passed, and the idea of herd immunity has no bearing until you have a vaccine. And I think what different countries have now is they have a policy in place in terms of international travel, and they're gradually opening up. Sweden has remained open for a very long time, as opposed to what we did in India. Okay, but I would say that we have a different health system, and whereas Sweden has a different sort of population which does not have the kind of burden that we have in terms of infectious diseases, non-communicable diseases, definitely not a dense population. So globally, what we're seeing now is the lockdown being eased gradually, and I think we'll come to those questions later regarding why this is happening. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. That gives a good picture of where we stand today. I think you mentioned about the herd immunity that Sweden tried in the beginning, and I think there are a lot of research mentioned, but the mathematical model mentioned about how many people would die if you kind of just open everything and act as if nothing has happened. That looks much more alarming than what it is right now. So now let's move on to understanding the affected population. So the virus seemed to be affecting a certain population of people, a certain vulnerable section of the community. So can you please talk about how does it affect men versus women, children, young children, people with comorbidities? We talk about pre-existing conditions, health conditions. And of course, the second part of the question, we could also talk about the cats and dogs. So I'm sure there are a lot of pet lovers even in our academy. So can you tell us the vulnerable community, who is at big risk of catching? And I think the virus, it doesn't really look at the person behind or who it hops onto, right? So it basically goes onto everybody. But it seems to be affecting only a particular section of the population. So
this virus doesn't see anyone. It can infect anyone. That's it. Anyone, from a child who is 5 days old to a man who is 115 years old, should there be a man or a woman at the age of 115. So it sees no age. It's only that if it comes in contact, yes, it catches and then it enters the lungs, or it enters through the intestines, that is through the mouth, or even through the eye. So a majority, say 80% at least, are asymptomatic, meaning they don't, look like, they have suffered this infection, even though the virus is pretty well sitting there. And that's the dangerous preposition, because these asymptomatic persons No, I think even I might be. I could have been because I never suffered this infection. You see, these healthy individuals, when they enter, say, for example, their house itself. See, I have seen cases coming from a house, say, a 45-year-old person coming in who had a diabetes or a hypertension. I'll tell you the comorbidities. So this person comes and says, "Sir, I have not gone out anywhere. I don't know how I got this infection." When we test him, he had come with for a fever and mild cold, and after some times he say, "I'm breathless." And we test him for COVID, he turns positive. So when we just go through the contacts, we break ahead and finally find out it is a young individual who had just given this infection. So the virus sees no one, everyone is infected. Now, as far as the comorbidities, that is, these are the individuals who are at higher risk to be symptomatic. That's it. So everyone can be infected, 80% are asymptomatic, and those persons who become symptomatic are the dangerous ones, and it is dangerous for their lives. Now, they are number one would be diabetes. Diabetes mellitus, in fact, not diabetes. There are two types of diabetes, mellitus and insipidus. We forget about insipidus. Diabetes mellitus, wherein the blood sugars are very high and the immunity of the person drops down as and when the diabetes increases in the period. Second thing is hypertension. People, especially on a drug called ACE inhibitors, angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors. Because this virus has a receptor affinity for angiotensin converting receptors. So this virus especially enters through that site only. And people on these particular drugs, are more susceptible. So hypertensive per se, and then obesity. Yeah, this is really one I have seen in my own practice here. Unfortunately, I won't be able to tell the number of deaths I had in my hospital, and most of them, sir, say 80% were obese. So obesity is a killer for this particular disease. And they also, if a person is obese, naturally he or she could have hypertension, say 60%. So diabetes, hypertension, obesity. Then we have this, we call it COPD, meaning chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases. They are like, bronchitis, asthma, then something else called as, bronchiectasis, those sort of. Asthma is a common term, we can use it. Okay, sir. Then the other susceptible peoples are, the chronic, the kidney patients, the kidney disease, we call it chronic kidney failure diseases. So those people are also susceptible. Then we have the elderly who are more than 80 years. Then immunocompromised people, that is mainly the cancer patients, even they are large in the community and they are on, drugs which will decrease their immunity. So overall, these persons whomever I call who are susceptible are immunocompromised. So these people are the ones. That is the list.
So we were talking about transmission through pets because there was a bit of a scare saying that dogs can transmit coronavirus. So the canine coronavirus is different. You do not get coronavirus from your dogs. So please don't abandon your pets. We don't have enough evidence to say that cats are silent reservoirs for coronavirus. So as of now we do not know if any of these are known reservoirs for the coronavirus. Definitely, I wouldn't go so far as saying that food practices in China are what led to this. What we need to focus is on food security, because the most common foodborne virus is the Norwalk virus, which is basically caused by eating improperly cleaned salads. So the idea that and basically animals are the cause of all of this is not the right sort of outlook on this.
Can you please take us the entire journey of this virus affecting somebody with a pre-existing condition and also somebody who's healthy?
So when this virus enters, say, anyone, if it is an asymptomatic person, the virus multiplies in him. At the same time, simultaneously our body's antibodies. Oh my God! Our antibodies start fighting the virus, and they try to neutralize it. No, that is one way, and then slowly the body wins over the virus situation, and the antibodies, they are in more number, and then we become slowly immune to that virus. Now, as far as people who are susceptible and who are immunocompromised, as is the diabetes and hypertension and kidney disease, those sort of a person, what happens is this virus starts infecting, multiplying, and their defense mechanisms are not able to cope up with this. So what happens is then this person develops fever, right? Then they develop something called as respiratory infection because this primarily enters through the lungs. So they may have a common cold sort of a thing, and slowly this virus, has an affinity to something called as endothelium of the arteries. The arteries have got something called as endothelium. Okay? So the lungs, the alveoli, the outer part of it has this blood vessels, and these endotheliums are now getting infected, and then they become slowly thrombosed. So from the common cold, the next day slowly the patient's lungs are getting destroyed. The alveolus outside the alveolus get destroyed. So what happens is even though the oxygen is available, it's not available for the bloodstream to be absorbed and to be thrown into the outside. So normal persons, if you see, they have something called as oxygen saturation. It is commonly it's above 95, 98. In a patient with asthma, we can accept it up to 95%. Now, once this infection sets into these comorbid people, so the lungs are not able to deliver the oxygen beyond them because the blood vessels are clogged. So the saturation falls down slowly, and without any external oxygen support, they become breathless. So fever, respiratory infection, nasal block, and then cough. They cough because there is a itching. It's a reactive phenomena in their lung. So they cough, and then they become breathless because the oxygen level in the body drops because of this blockage of oxygen not getting through the bloodstream. So this is the time we should help them. This is the time the patient becomes symptomatic and he becomes breathless. So they have to be admitted. And then we give them oxygen, and then we see the hydration of the patient. They have to be properly hydrated. Their sugar levels have to be checked and they have to be corrected. If they have a hypertension, then that has to be corrected. Now, if they, as I said before, if they are a kidney patient, now they have to be dialyzed. So these sort of a scenario sets in. But the mainstay of treatment is, first thing is oxygen. They have to be admitted and put under oxygen. And then certain blood tests are to be done, like, complete blood count. Then we go into something called as, there are so many parameters. With this complete blood count, we have something called as NLR ratio, that is neutrophil is to lymphocyte ratio. So there, normally it should be less than 5. Suppose it is more than 5, then we have go to the next test, namely, something called as ferritin, LDH. These are some markers which say that the body has a high immune response, and then something called as inflammatory response. The immune response means the body's ability to fight the infection, and the inflammatory responses, these are the cellular mediators, meaning the mediators in the cells which try to kill the virus. What happens when these become overwhelmingly increased? The other parts of the body becomes damaged, namely the kidneys, the brain, the heart, the lungs. These are the 4 target organs. So we have to contain the inflammation. So we use certain drugs. We call it immunomodulators, namely hydroxychloroquine, or we have injectable drugs like, to just name a few, tocilizumab. And there are specific antivirals, but in practice, I think Dr. Ria will agree to me, there is no drug which really kills this virus. It's only the body which has to do it. We just control the infection with these immunomodulators and decrease the immune response. And it's then the patient's own mechanism with these drugs, they pick up and then they survive. Well, if beyond this oxygen and this thing, they don't survive, the ultimate thing is we have to ventilate. Now, that most of them, say 90% of the hospitals don't do, because once into the ventilator, it's very difficult for the patient to come back. It's not that all don't come back. A few patients do come back, but it looks like that is terminal.
Now, whatever measures that you take in the initial stages, when somebody is symptomatic, somebody also having a comorbid condition, you're basically trying to solve the comorbid condition or stabilize those aspects so that the body picks up the immunity or the strength to fight the virus on its own. Because you also mentioned that there is no direct medication that can kill the virus. It's our own body's response to fighting the virus is what can protect us. But that's how most of the people are recovering at this time, at this point in time, people who are recovering are developing their own immunity to fight against the virus. Their body is fighting against the virus, not because of any medication. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, we are supporting from outside, sir. We make the blood, we give adequate hydration so that there is a good flow. We try to increase the oxygen by giving nasal oxygen through many mechanisms. And then we also give the suppressants like, steroids, and then we have this tocilizumab, some drugs. Okay, and then even this hydroxychloroquine, and we prevent the secondary bacterial infection. See, when our body is weakened, the bacteria coming. So there we give a higher antibiotics. At the same time, control these diabetes. And so one more thing, all this is happening in the ward, and minded the patient is a highly infectious person. So the people who are dealing with them, right from feeding them to nursing them to cleaning the floors, they all are to wear something called as PPE, which is called as personal protective equipment. Now, these are no, one has to wear it to feel. Unfortunately or fortunately, it has struck India in summer. Already we are sweltering at around 40 to 45 degrees. And even when you wear these dresses, you can't be inside it for more than 2 hours. I myself find it very difficult to work beyond 2 hours, but they are protective and mandatory.
Okay. Now, I can imagine the operating conditions are extremely dangerous. It's like a war zone right now, and I'm sure. Now, I have also
Coach, I just want to add two updates to what Dr. Mahesh has said.
Please.
So there are two updates that have come in just now and based on this, WHO has modified the treatment guidelines. You know, there is an impact on your blood vessels also, and because of which they have sort of said that you need to use something called low molecular weight heparins to prevent that thrombosis like situation. Okay, so in any emergency, your ABC is airway, breathing, circulation, and this virus has attacked exactly that, and that is why it's so difficult to actually control this, right? So apart from that, the recent news that has come in is that hydroxychloroquine is now, has not shown as much improvement based on something called the recovery trial. And that's another thing that's happening, that the data that's coming in is getting dated so quickly that, we have to be on our toes all the time, based on the information coming in. So
I've just come across a couple of RWAs, the Resident Welfare Association, some of the apartments. They're in the process of setting up their own emergency care wards with, let's say, the oxygen saturation, oxygen cylinders. What's your take on this? Do you think can somebody create an environment which is much more supportive for somebody developing symptom outside of an hospital? Do you think it is really possible for somebody with good heart to set up something outside the hospital which can provide some kind of a staging area for the symptomatic patients? And also, there is another view is some of the hospitals are not admitting patients. Somebody with symptoms going to the hospital, but some of them are rejected treatment. And I'm not sure if this can be answered by you. Would appreciate if you can share some thoughts about, can somebody set up a staging place or a safer place outside the hospital environment?
There are two aspects to your question, sir. One thing, as I can infer from is that can it be treated something like outside the hospital? Yes. First thing is they need to have a oxygen saturation measuring device. That is a finger mounted thing. If it is less than 90, I advise it cannot be managed at home, because oxygen alone is not the main support. It is only giving oxygen, but then, as I told, the oxygen has to be carried and gone to it has to go to the other part of the body. So you have these IV fluids, you have this heparin, you have this tocilizumab. They have to be monitored, sir. All patients won't require whatever I said. They are all based on the barrage of tests we perform, right? If I enumerate, there may be a lot of doubts. There are so many parameters we have to go into the blood test. Simple thing is complete blood count, and then urea creatinine. Then we something called as a D dimer. Then we do ferritin. At last, we do something called as IL-6. And I'm not doing, there is something else, the common test, CT scan, which is actually the first test they do that determines how much amount of lung has been destroyed, and they categorize according to it. So, treating outside the hospital is not recommendable, sir, because first aid is also dangerous. They have to wear those protective gears and to enter.
How do we protect ourselves? I think this is also a debated topic. And of course, see the social distancing, the concept when it started, we said that okay, the families to families, neighbor to neighbor interaction should stop. Okay, the apartments, the place where I'm living, we kind of isolated ourselves. We said okay, no visitors from outside should come into our apartment. Any food that will be delivered outside, it has to lie down there for. If there are packages, it has to be kept there for about 24 hours before we bring it inside. And then again, keeping our hands clean with sanitizer. So all these things were very seriously followed in the beginning, but now I see a little bit of laxity, relaxing, kind of thinking that this is not going to affect us. Kind of there is a what do you call a level of confidence that we have gained, which is not the correct one, I guess, because the virus threat is still there. Now, what is your take on, we see the other serious end of this disease, the doctor's point of view, what kind of struggle that all of you are going through, right from managing your own health and fitness to the stress levels, and then there's a lot of psychological stress that you all going through. It is very evident here. What is your advice on how one should protect? And also, probably the second part of the question is about exercise. We'll talk about that in a short while. So how do we protect ourselves? And not just the self, but the family, the community. Is it okay if there's a community which is cut off from an outside world? Can the children go and play with each other? So where do we draw the line here?
So actually, you got a good question. I'll just put it in a simple way. See, doctors were the first line of defense those days. And society was taking a backseat. Now it's not the way. Doctors are the last persons you must come and see because you must have exhausted the other resources, namely the preventive aspects. So for that, just going a bit, where all we get the disease. So if you know where all we get the disease, we can prevent it. Simple. First thing is gathering. More than 4 people or 3 people should not gather, and that too within a distance of 6 feet. Because this virus, again, often it's said, cannot. It's a heavier virus, so it drops down after say 3 feet or 4 feet. So gathering should be avoided. Now, gathering places, if you just see markets, it can be the provision store, it can be the vegetable market, it can be the non-vegetarian market, even in the medical stores. So here the distancing is appropriate, and people should wear masks. And you see, even the mask, there is a simple thing, sir. It will be there over the nose, What we should not do is touch the front side of the mask. If you touch the front side of the mask, that is the infective place. So once you wear the mask, don't take your hand in front of the mask. Keep it away. You must be conscious that once we are wearing a mask, don't take your hand in front of the mask and don't scratch your head. We should not be clumsy. Think the hands are given, but then only away from the face, because this is where the virus can enter. Second place is the workplace. Say there is something called as fomites. We have the habit of opening the door with the hand. We must not do this one. You have to open with the elbow, push it out, or use your legs. So thereby we avoid, and even while climbing a staircase, so in apartments, don't catch the railings because somebody else would have touched it. And here again, one more preventive thing is we can employ some person to use the alcohol to clean those stainless steel railings and the doorknobs. And then if you see our colleagues in the workplace getting the tea, so those things to be avoided. I remember admitting one of my patients. Now he said, "Sir, I was so clean, sir. I never went to the market anywhere." But then when I quarantined him, he had nothing else to do but to think, and then he came out with the answer. Now I remember, sir, where I got the infection. Tell me, where did you get it? Sir, the tea maker had come from a quarantined area, and she got in a tea in the flask, and I just handled the flask. So you got it? Being so careful, but nothing happened. I'm going to discharge him on Monday. Then the vendors. See, everybody, see, even I may be a source, you may be a source. I'm not discriminating. The vendors, tea sellers, coffee sellers, or vegetable sellers, we have to be careful. I say, no, these are maybe asymptomatic people. So the distancing, hand washing, face mask, that alone will solve it.
Do you see a pattern in terms of how they are affected when they come to the hospital? Do you get, and I'm sure there is going to be some screening questionnaire. Where do you see the most kind of infection and spreading? Is it again gatherings, or is it like people touching different surfaces? What exactly is the reason for most of the people falling victim to this virus?
The pattern that I'm seeing right now is definitely those coming from a hotspot because it's an airborne infection. We definitely see more, if people are coming from an area which already has more cases. But I agree with Dr. Mahesh. I think he summarized it very well, in terms of what are the things that, actually pose a greater sort of risk. But having said that, something that is airborne is very, very difficult to sort of control. And now we're talking about face shields. Apart from masks, we're talking about face shields so that it prevents the entry of the virus not only from the respiratory route but also through the conjunctiva, that is from the eyes. And it's sort of a better barrier compared to just having a mask and gloves. The patterns that I'm seeing in the clinic are a lot of diabetics, definitely. I'm seeing a lot of males, definitely people over 50, pregnant women, and especially those coming from hotspots, because pregnancy is also an immunocompromised state. So these are people that I think we should be watching out, looking after these people, sort of. There is no sorting hat which says, okay, you are, more prone to getting COVID, and none of that. So I think we just have to be vigilant and mindful about how we're interacting and follow what Dr. Mahesh says.
No, brilliant. I think he gave a lot of visual cues in terms of what kind of things that we can do. Those things are very implementable, simple to follow. I think every day morning you have to wake up and say that, hey, this COVID is still there. Remember these 10 things, right? Tend to keep forgetting and also getting complacent about that.
Dr. Rifa, twice or thrice you mentioned airborne. Does it mean it is just in the air and we could catch it, or what you mean is airborne is somebody through droplets it comes in the air? That's what you're saying? Or airborne means it is even if I walk out of I'm in an apartment, I walk out into the lobby, it could be sitting there to attack me, something like that.
The size of the virus, is actually what differentiates it from being aerosols, smaller droplets and larger droplets. So luckily, we know that this is found mostly in larger droplets and not in aerosols, right? So it is by airborne, I mean, see, infectious diseases are classified basically as waterborne, airborne, vector-borne, or through, transmitted through animal origin, right? So in that way, I'm saying that it's airborne, but your question is valid. It is through larger droplets, those which settle on, say, fomite, as Dr. Mahesh has mentioned. So it's not that you're walking around and it will, it's out there for you. If you touch certain surfaces where it's already present, if you come in contact with someone who is without a mask, then and who's probably a carrier, then there are higher chances of you acquiring.
Which means if you're running in the road at 5 a.m. in the morning, are there chances of catching it in the air, or somebody should cross you, or somebody should sneeze, or somebody should be a carrier already for you to catch it?
So two things here. Are you running with the mask or without a mask?
That's the biggest question, because of the mask, I am not running. Many people are wearing the mask, easing it, and just running. I still feel it's a big argument that is going on between people I know. But is it okay?
Walking increases your oxygen demand. Normal walking, you can wear a mask. Narayanan sir has himself answered his question. See, somebody crosses you, he sneezes and then he moves away. So that is how you get it. If you're going to run, don't run with a mask. There is no mask necessary when you're going to run. And at 5 a.m., when no person has walked before you, it is unlikely that the virus is staying in there. That's what Rifa madam was saying. The virus drops to the ground. It's heavier, sir. It doesn't go here and there. It just goes 3 feet or 4 feet and falls down. It's so heavy, but it's still invisible to the eye. So running, run, but without a mask. Walk, slow walk, mask advised. Right. Three persons are running in front of you. You go 5 feet to the right or the left, provided there is space, and then keep running. Keep that distance. And when you're running, the chances of letting the virus from a symptomatic person into the air is very high. So you must be 10 feet behind him or in front of him.
Thank you, Dr. Mahesh, for answering that. So just to give you an example, anthrax was an example of something that is airborne. Okay, that is bioterrorism. That's different. This is more spread through large droplets, and as Dr. Mahesh has clearly put it, you need to be in contact with someone, like you said, someone sneezing or being that close contact for you to actually get infected. The reason why I ask about masks is I have seen some runners who are running without a mask. Some are using an air restriction, they think they're training for air restriction with an air restriction mask. So I would say unless you have, experience of training with that, please do not use it now. Like, this is not a time to test your respiratory reserve, especially at a time when you have been at home for so many weeks, you've not gone running. Suddenly, you can't start using a mask and start running. So I would, if you have the privilege of running in a place where there aren't too many people, by all means that's fine, because running in these distances where there isn't too many people, there aren't too many people around you, there is less chances of you acquiring the infection. But running in groups, I've seen that also. I've seen people walking in groups and sort of like holding a towel to their mouth. I mean, that's just inviting trouble. So my sincere request for you to do is, you want to run, you run alone. Or if you want to run, if you're a lady and you're running, you feel safer having to run someone run with you, you make sure someone is running behind at a fair distance, and probably at a place where you won't come in contact with too many people.
I've been reading up on, high altitude training. And in the high altitude training simulation, people use, high altitude training mask to train and give that, simulate that high altitude. So why is it so difficult to run with a mask? Why can't we use this as an opportunity to do that kind of a training? Because all the high altitude training is supposed to be benefit a runner. Most of the runners, even the best of the runners, they all go to high altitude train and come back to run races. So that's the question I wanted to ask. And
Brilliant.
First question, and then second question was, what entails screening, that COVID screening? Dr. Rifa had mentioned, there are certain, I screen people to whether they should get a COVID test or not. These two questions I wanted to know.
Sure. These are really good questions, ma'am. The first question is regarding high altitude training. So at a high altitude, the humidity is different. Okay, the air quality is different. We cannot compare that to city running. Okay, that is one. The second thing also is that unless you have to develop this gradually, even if you're using an air restriction mask, what is your respiratory reserve? If you have not been running for a long time, it is not advisable to suddenly start with it for a longer duration of time. Okay, so unless you are coaching with someone, and by all means, I think this is where you could ask coach how you can go about training with this. But there are other exercises which help build your respiratory reserve, and I would say start combining those with this before you use it. Something that really helps building respiratory reserve is swimming, but unfortunately I know swimming pools are closed right now. And probably cycling is another form of aerobic exercise which can help build your respiratory reserve. And use a mask gradually and build it up. Please don't try 10Ks and things like that with an air restriction mask. That is, I would not recommend that. Your other question is regarding screening. So according to ICMR, we have 10-point category of saying people who are asymptomatic, who have come in contact with a known lab confirmed case, people who are asymptomatic and who have come in contact with a healthcare worker, those healthcare workers with and without PPEs, Then we have a category called those with influenza-like illness, as Dr. Mahesh has explained very well what is an influenza-like illness. Then we have another category called, severe acute respiratory infection. How do you? That is another category. And then, of course, you have pregnant women and those who are going into labor. The current every state has their own rules, but the rule in Tamil Nadu is that a procedure cannot be delayed for the want of a COVID test, and neither can labor related procedures be delayed for the want of a COVID test. Okay, but for the safety of healthcare personnel, it's advisable that you get a COVID screening done and then move forward with the procedure. So these are few categories, and then of course it's up to the discretion of the physician, saying that okay, you probably need a COVID test, like Dr. Mahesh had mentioned, people with chronic kidney disease. So someone going in for dialysis, they are being asked to be screened for COVID before they go in, because unlikely that they would be the only person who's getting a dialysis done. You're in a room which has so many people who are going in together. So these are things that these are the people who are usually screened for COVID. And of course, interstate travel is something but that is more of a policy decision, and not from a medical perspective that interstate travel COVID screening is.
Okay,
So I can't
see,
go
as far
to
as
any
the high
place.
altitude,
Sorry, sorry, Coach. I just wanted to ask whether if I can't go and walk and ask for a COVID test. I just wanted to check that.
Ma'am, which state are you in?
I am in Maharashtra, Pune.
Okay, so you can definitely ask for a COVID test. You will have to go contact a healthcare provider, yeah, because you need a doctor's prescription to get screened for COVID. You can also contact a lab, and I think they have their own procedures on how this needs to be done. In Tamil Nadu, we have a different system wherein you have fever clinics. You also have you can contact a lab, and then they have a procedure wherein they put you in touch with the in-house doctor, and they will do a screening. So.
Many of us have been kind of taking multiple precautions, against infection from people. But what about, the infections that could come because of, Amazon delivering a package, or vegetables that, we cannot kind of, wash with a soap. So from the internet, I have kind of, figured out soaking it in vinegar and salt for, 10-15 minutes really helps. But I would like to, get it from the horse's mouth. I would like you both to say, because packages, yes, I keep it in the balcony for an hour so that the virus is sort of killed. But what about fresh vegetables? How do we safeguard ourselves?
I myself got, some AMSoil. That's the synthetic oil from a motorcycle. It just landed 2 days back. So it doesn't come in a pack. What I did is I got a sanitizer, immediately just sprayed it all around the box, cleaned it, put a gloves, cut it open, and then took out the uh, bottles. And even those, I wiped with a bit of alcohol. Now, as far as these vegetables are concerned, yes, you buy the vegetables. Again and again, we repeat, don't touch your nose, don't touch your hair. Just touch the vegetables alone, clean it properly. Be conscious that you are dealing with something. Cut the vegetables, put them in the cleaning thing, whatever it is, and then start cooking. Once the heat is up, the virus is destroyed. But then your hands, mind your hands, vegetables are safe. Your hands you have to sanitize, clean it with running soap. I mean soap, and for at least say 10 minutes, it's over. Don't do the mistake of touching the vegetables and touching your nose or mouth. That's the main thing.
So I've been involved in advising, these. So there's a group in Bangalore which basically is mobilizing Amazon delivery people, Ola drivers, Uber drivers, because their livelihood was seriously hit by the lockdown, right? And we actually had, a system of a roster wherein people who are who were part of delivering it, they would be on duty for 2 weeks, and then they would be given a week off. So we've advised them on those things. They are doing temperature checks from their side. They are using gloves and hand sanitizers. But I agree with what Dr. Mahesh has said. Packages, you don't need to keep them out in sunlight. You just have to wipe it down with an alcohol wipe or something, so that after that you open it. And as far as what you're buying, the edible things, I think just washing it down and then washing your hands and cooking as soon as possible. That's what we can do.
do you advise that right now during this period we should not have any fresh vegetable? In the sense, what about fruits? We don't cook it, right? We eat it raw. Coriander, cucumber, such things. How do we get rid of the virus from the vegetables that we don't cook?
So that, I mean, you may say doing away with the, see, COVID is not before this COVID time also, there was a virus, as I mentioned before, which is commonly spread through, food that is not cooked. Okay, so as long as you're using precautions to clean your food as you would normally do, I don't think that should be a problem. So you don't have to eliminate salads and those kind of things, because um, at a certain level, I think we have to accept that in a lot of ways a respiratory illness is a matter of when and not if. Okay, you are delaying this to a point where you probably have a vaccine, you have better resources to deal with it. But I don't think we need to get paranoid to the extent of saying eliminate food groups that you cannot eat or consume directly. You just have to be mindful about the way you're cleaning it. Ozone is something, I'm sure you've seen of vacutainers where you can keep your vegetables fresh. That's another way. But mostly what we are seeing is switch to soups. Those are some things that high temperature that can kill this virus.
The lockdown has been relaxed and people are moving out. I think there's one silver line in the cloud was during the lockdown period was I think there's number of accidental death in this country has dramatically gone down because India is one of the highest and Chennai and Tamil Nadu is definitely largest in terms of the number of people killed in road accidents. I've been a road safety ambassador, first responder, many incidences. I've been wishing that I don't spot any accidents, road accidents during this lockdown, plus the coronavirus time. So, as doctors, what are your advice in case if there is an accident victim? You find somebody, the accident need not have to be road accident, right? It can be somebody fainting down or somebody having a hypoglycemia kind of condition, and a heart attack to that extent. Because the CPR is one of the most commonly spoken about way to recover somebody, resuscitate somebody. But with the virus lurking around and contact is social distancing is the norm, how do we really help accident victims?
Now, as far as CPR, right? I'm specific. CPR. I mean, it's not to say in this time better avoid CPR. It's not safe because we don't know whether he has fainted because of hypoglycemia or because the COVID itself. They simply drop dead. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, and kindly be frightened. I have seen people just dropping dead. They go from hypoxia to very bad conditions. So CPR, don't attempt. If it's a road traffic accident, right? Deal with them properly, clean the blood. I don't think so you'll be having a glove all the while. But now I say this virus is going to be here for another 2 years. I'm not exaggerating. We have to live with it. So now we have to carry gloves in our pockets if you are really social, social worker or intention to have somebody to help on the road. Take some gloves in your pocket, put a small sanitizer in your hand, wear the mask. Yes, with the gloves on, you can just do the first aid. CPR, I still believe strict no.
Is about self-medication. So we hear a lot about mix this ingredients, which are natural. Some of them are medication, which are available off the counters. And then you can develop immunity. I'm not very clear. Can somebody develop immunity just by kind of switching to Ayurveda? Or I'm not against any of these practices, but it's more a question in terms of how soon somebody can develop immunity. Let's say if I consume some medication, immunity building medications, how long does it take for me to develop that immunity so that I can fight other diseases?
Self-medication with hydroxychloroquine is not advisable, sir, because we need to have something called as an ECG because it can prolong, it can cause bradycardia and so many, arrhythmias in the heart. So self-medication with chloroquine or is not at all advisable in this scenario of COVID. Yes, you can have ginger drinks, you can have turmeric drinks, you can have pepper drinks. So these are, age-old traditional drinks which we can drink. But as far as the allopathic medicines are concerned, even paracetamol for fever, you can have it. But next day visit the doctor and say you had a fever and then get a test for COVID. That's advisable.
Okay. Now, yeah, so the one part of my question was, let's say, even if I switch to ginger, pepper, turmeric, kind of, let's say, Ayurvedic, a natural way of building immunity, how long does it take for me to develop that immunity?
So it is only
Is there a way we
improving
can
it's only improving your immunity, I said, but it doesn't kill the virus. The virus will enter. The virus will enter. At this time only that ginger or pepper, whatever you have taken, will try to fight the disease and then make you asymptomatic or symptomatic, and it depends on how your immune system is. It cannot kill the virus.
The question you've asked can
building.
be answered once we have a vaccine, okay? Because if you, for example, if you give an influenza vaccine, the time taken to develop your immunity is 3 weeks. So if you want that sort of a definitive answer, we would need something more concrete. But in terms of, but health is a continuum, right? So use your traditional medicines. Please do not experiment with something you have not done before. I know everyone is desperate for answers right now, but something you haven't done before without the knowledge of your primary care practitioner, please do not, attempt it.
Dr. Rifa, you mentioned about the introduction of telemedicine and teleconsultation. So what are the scenarios under which I can directly call the hospitals if I have some kind of an illness? What are the norm? And I'm sure certain things cannot be advised on the phone. And can you throw some light on this subject?
So something else that I've been working during the lockdown, coach, is it's been very, very difficult for people who are both sick and healthy. All right, people who are previously known to have diseases such as, say, TB, hypertension, diabetes, HIV, whatever it may be. So what we have developed, I think it's just sort of like, we all needed that catalyst to move to telemedicine, and now things like over-the-counter drugs can be prescribed over using a video consult through WhatsApp or whatever your doctor is comfortable with. You can get refills to medications that were previously prescribed, provided you don't have any new symptoms. So the government of India has come out with a gazette which has specific rules for doctors and patients on what can be part of telemedicine consult. However, in cases of emergency, okay, newly developed symptoms that are progressively getting worse, you have to go to an emergency. If And I'm sure Dr. Mahesh will agree, surgical consults cannot happen on telemedicine. You need someone to palpate, examine, and do those things, right? And someone who has previously been taking medication, say chemotherapy or those serious illnesses, by all means your doctor would have a plan for you, and you have to, if you have to visit and see them to continue those medications, I think our hospitals are still open to take in those sort of ailments. But telemedicine is restricted specifically to make sure that you're not overburdening the health system, and addressing people's problems. So your regular cough, colds, fevers, and because COVID is here doesn't mean the other viruses and bacteria are on a holiday. Those things are still prevalent. Yeah. So there's no reason for you to falter on adherence to your previously given prescription.
I've been hearing a lot about your work indirectly. It's not that you have stated that this is exactly what you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. Can you please walk all of us through what is a typical day like in your life during this COVID scenarios? You're all doctors. You get to go to the hospitals. That's where the war is happening, right? What's your typical day like? Can you please tell us? And also, how many hours do you get really to sleep?
Sir, I go to hospital. I wake up at 3:30 a.m. That's my routine. By 5, please don't scold or don't be there. I'm there in Avadi. Nobody is here. So I go for my 5 kilometer or 10 kilometer jog or run, come back. By 6, I start and hit the hospital by 6:45 to 7. I ring up the COVID ward, COVID suspect ward, isolation ward. Then I had to communicate with the, intelligence, then the corporation people, police people, and the DMS people, and update them about what is happening. And then, if there is that unfortunate death, it may be in the casualty or it may be in the COVID ward.
God.
There, even yesterday evening, so this, confidential thing. Don't be afraid. Yeah, there was a death in the casualty, but then he was from a far off place. He had to cross the borders of the district. So I instructed the doctor, come on, you do the swab test, put the body in the morgue, and wait for the result. If the result comes negative, then you can hand over the body to the relatives. If it's positive, we have to follow a certain protocols, where you can simply hand over the body. So, and I end up my day around say 6 p.m., come back home by 7, sing a song, and then go to sleep.
I see to an extent this is taken even death occurring due to non-COVID kind of a scenario. There is a protocol to test and then handle the person whoever has died in a very responsible manner. It's amazing to know that how your day starts and ends with the thoughts of coronavirus, and I'm sure it's a very complicated thing to even imagine. Thank you so much, Dr. Mahesh. Dr. Rifa.
I'll be honest. I sleep when I can. So I'm usually up by 5:30, and then I take my dog for a walk. That's a time that's my luxury for the day. So I take him for a walk, and then I have to quickly sort of collate all the data that's come from the previous night, and we need to share it with different intelligence. And then we move to the clinic by say 8, because that's when people start coming in and you screen them, and that can go on till about 6 p.m. But in the meantime, we're also making sure we connect with people like Dr. Mahesh to find beds for people who need them, and say, okay, this person is going to collapse, can you please take them in? So things like that. And then usually I'm home by about 7, and I started taking up the whole RCF was really helpful for me, because it helped me sort of take a break from everything. But I would have to stop in between, answer calls, and I take my dog for another walk in the evening. So that's my mental health part of it. And then there's no end to it. We can get a call anytime asking for any kind of data, or if there's a containment zone, then you have to plan for the next day about where you're going to deploy a mobile collection unit, and things like that. So we're also in touch with the Chief Minister's health insurance scheme, which is basically paying for a lot of tests that are ordered by the government in containment zones. So we need to sort of collate all that data and make sure that's sort of ready for the Chief Minister's office. So yeah, that's as far as my day is concerned. But yeah, after, I think coach would be like, okay, you need to sort of have at least 6 to 7 hours of sleep. You do not have enough hours of sleep. So I think it's nice to sort of have that. But I don't know about Dr. Mahesh, but my family is scattered all over the country, and in some ways it's good, because I would be very terrified to take that infection back home, because I have elderly parents, and my mother-in-law is elderly, and I would not want to take that infection back home. So I haven't seen my family in 6 months now, but I'm hoping that once probably I'll acquire the infection and the immunity to then go and visit them. So that's what's happening in my life.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rifa. So that kind of summarizes what an irresponsible citizen can contribute to, right? So we're basically adding to the stresses to the medical community, and probably leading you not to have a good piece of even a daily routine is very much impacted and affected. Because I understand, as a doctor before COVID, you will probably deal with certain random cases, but here it's kind of, if the days are completely occupied by the same thing, and I'm sure that can lead to a lot of mental health related issues. So we are, all of us, on behalf of the Fritzian community, we have a great respect for what you're doing right now. And we are here to bring a small amount of smile every single day, so that even to an extent, if that means that we need to do some crazy dance and send a video to you both to make sure that you're staying cheerful the entire day. So that's absolutely important for us, and we are very proud to be connected through this small community here. Thank you so much for this insightful discussion. Whatever was discussed and shared today is more than a jackpot. It's more than mining the or bringing the COVID virus. The kind of information that I have personally gained is really, I can't even count it. Thank you so much. Be more responsible. And I'm also, my personal request to all the Fitzians to be more responsible. Now we know what's happening in the world of doctors. This coronavirus is going to stay. Dr. Mahesh said 2 years. So be more responsible. If that also means that changing our goals and taking an alternate path, which is much, I would say, safer path for not just for us, but also to the entire community around us, to the entire country, and also to the world. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.